Christopher Columbus was the most important explorer of the Americas, if for no other reason than he was the first to reach the New World. If it had not been for his courage in the face of the unknown, the discovery of America and even of new trade routes to the east would have been indefinitely postponed. The course of human history might have been changed. Let us begin his story by moving back to 15th century Italy. In the fall of 1451, a son was born to a family of woolen weavers in the city of Genoa, Italy. His name was Christopher Columbus. Thus, the explorer who was to accomplish so many things under the flag of Spain was actually an Italian. Little is known of Columbus' boyhood, except that he worked at his father's loom in a woolen establishment and dreamed of the sea. He was not well adapted to the unadventurous life of a weaver. He spent much of his time at the busy port of Genoa, observing the comings and goings of the ships. Before he was 26, Columbus' love for the sea manifested itself. During 1473 and 1474, he sailed the Mediterranean and took voyages to Ireland and Iceland. These journeys were full of dangers and hardships, but they served only to strengthen Columbus' determination to make navigation his career. Columbus learned the tropical waters while a sailor with the Portuguese. He sailed to the African coast and learned much navigation from them in 1477 and 1478. But Columbus longed to make greater and more difficult voyages. Dreaming of a voyage to the west, Columbus eagerly talked with Portuguese sailors who had been to the Canaries and the Azores. The trip to these islands was really of no great consequence. Columbus discussed the possibility of pushing further westward. The sailors only laughed. Geographical knowledge during this time was limited. Columbus' belief that the earth was round was not shared by all mariners of the day. Instead, they imagined that the earth was flat, like a table. Any ship sailing to its edge would go over a waterfall and drop out of sight forever. They believed that the edge was not far beyond the Canary Islands. Nothing Columbus said could change their minds. Products of the East were greatly in demand throughout Europe. Spices, such as pepper and cloves, were highly prized. Foods which had been bland and uninteresting up to then could be made exotic and appetizing with the addition of spices. Moreover, meats and other foods could be preserved for long periods of time with the help of the spices. For this reason, Eastern spices brought a high price in Europe. Trade with the East was by ship over the Mediterranean, thence by land routes through Asia. This was a long and hazardous journey. Caravans which moved across Asia had to contend with mountain ranges, burning deserts, and bands of thieves. It was only after long journeys and great expense that Eastern goods could be brought to the Mediterranean. Venice and Genoa monopolized the Mediterranean trade. This forced Spain and Portugal to seek new routes so that they might get some of the trade for themselves. They hoped to find a route by water to the east, which would greatly cut the time and expense of the land route. In this way, they would be able to compete successfully with Italy. Starting about 1470, Prince Henry of Portugal sent his ships down the African coast to reach the east by sailing around the southern tip of Africa. But it was not until 1498 that this project was realized, when Vasco da Gama sailed all the way to India and back to Portugal. Christopher Columbus, however, believed that a faster water route to India could be found by sailing west. He thought perhaps Portugal would be interested in financing such a journey. Columbus went to Lisbon in 1484 to request the aid of King John in financing an expedition to the east. The king, however, was more interested in the African route. This was before Vasco da Gama had managed to find the African route, and the king was unwilling to begin investing in the totally new suggestion of Columbus until it was established that a water route south of Africa was impossible. After the king's refusal, Columbus took his son Diego and journeyed to Spain. They arrived at La Robida Monastery, where kindly friars welcomed them. The monks listened to the details of Columbus' project with interest, but they were skeptical about his chances for success. They suggested, nonetheless, that Columbus present his ideas to the King and Queen of Spain and see if he could not capture their interest and enthusiasm. Columbus went to see King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain to seek aid in financing a search for new trade routes to the east. He advanced his original idea of reaching the east by sailing west, which shocked the rulers until they understood better what was involved. The Council of Salamanca, appointed by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to study Columbus' plan, decided against the proposed expedition. Columbus' ideas intrigued them, but the whole project seemed too risky to invest in until more facts were known about the ocean west of the Azores. Discouraged by the council's refusal, Columbus was leaving Spain in 1491 when he was hurriedly recalled. The Spanish court had reconsidered and would back the expedition. They decided that if Columbus were right in his guess, the profits which they would gain would be so enormous that the investment he required would be justified. Spain decided to take this risk. Columbus would have his chance to make the voyage. In the spring of 1492, Columbus made extensive preparations for his first expedition. It was difficult to recruit sailors, for few of them were willing to undertake a journey into the uncharted waters of the West Atlantic. But finally all of the preparations for the voyage were completed, and the date of departure was set. On August 3rd, 1492, the expedition set sail in 3 small ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. 90 men comprised the party. It was not a huge expedition because Spain was reluctant to invest much money until it had proof that the voyage was possible. But Columbus was content. He had been given the chance to make the voyage which had filled his dreams for so many years. Before continuing westward, the expedition made its final stop at the Canary Islands. This was then the westernmost outpost of Europe. They took a few supplies on board and made ready to depart once more. The real voyage lay ahead of them. September 6, 1492. The hardy band of explorers again sailed westward. This was their last sight of familiar soil for a long time. Perhaps a few doubts crossed Columbus' mind as he watched the islands retreat from sight, but he brushed them aside quickly. He was certain his voyage would be successful. The weather favored the expedition, and the main problem of Columbus was the crew's fear of the unknown. They were not comfortable sailing in waters which had never been traveled before. What if the ship came to the edge of the world and were washed over? Columbus did his best to quiet the seamen's fears and to persuade them that the journey west did not lead to the edge of the world. October 10th, 1492. The crew wanted to turn back, even though evidence of the nearness of land was seen. Columbus persuaded them to continue for 3 more days. Grudgingly, they agreed to do as he said. At 2 a.m., October 12th, 1492, land was sighted. They had discovered the island of San Salvador, now Watling's Island, in the Bahamas. there was great rejoicing on shipboard. They would not sail over the edge of the world after all. Each sailor was sure that he would make his fortune in the wealthy East Indies. But most pleased of all was Columbus. His guess had been correct, or so he believed. The expedition landed on the island the morning of October 12th, but that they were in Asia. He had no idea that a new continent had been discovered. The islands seemed to fit the description of some of the islands off the coast of Asia. Soon the inhabitants of the island came to meet the Europeans. Columbus questioned the strange natives as to the whereabouts of China and the capital of Kip-Angul, old name for Japan. He believed he was in Japan. The Indians, of course, did not recognize this name, but they told Columbus that other islands lay farther to the west. Perhaps he sought one of those. The expedition once again set sail, carrying Indian guides, and pointed their boats westward toward Cuba. Columbus had decided that the island he had reached must be some insignificant island west of Japan. The wealthy East had to be close, he was sure. After landing in Cuba, Columbus sent an expedition to the interior. They found a reported great city to be only a tiny town. Its inhabitants were uncivilized. They were neither Japanese nor true East Indians. Columbus could not imagine why his ships had not yet reached the civilized East, but he pushed onward. The Santa Maria ran aground off Haiti, known to the Spanish as Hispaniola, on Christmas Eve, 1492. The crew abandoned the wrecked ship in small boats. Somewhat apprehensively, they landed on the island. They founded the colony of Navidad at Haiti, with 39 of the men from the wrecked Santa Maria forming the colonists. A small fort with simple living quarters was built. Here the Spanish were to stay until the other two ships had returned to Spain and come back with reinforcements. On January 16, 1493, the remaining ships sailed toward Spain. Columbus, aboard the Nina, eagerly looked forward. He could imagine the reception he would receive once the news reached Spain that he had sailed to Asia. Those who had once ridiculed him would now be ridiculed themselves. The two tiny ships landed at Palos on March 15, 1493. Cheering crowds hailed Columbus and his party as conquering heroes. The Spanish people marveled at the strange birds and animals the explorer had brought back with him, as well as the savages, whom they immediately referred to as Indians. Columbus met with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella at Barcelona, Spain, on April 20th, 1493, to discuss further explorations. Convinced that Columbus had really reached Asia, the Spanish rulers were quite willing to finance further expeditions. They were sure that the profits for Spain would be immense. Columbus prepared for his second expedition amidst widespread enthusiasm. At the harbor of Cadiz, many sailors pleaded for a chance to accompany him. Everyone was eager to voyage to the east and make a fortune. Columbus had no trouble manning the numerous ships which had been turned over to him. The second expedition was comprised of 17 ships and 1,500 men. On September 5th, 1493, they set sail from Cadiz with high hopes for the future. Columbus felt confident that with the superior equipment and numbers of this second expedition, his second voyage would be a resounding success. Landing at Navidad, the second expedition found the colony wiped out to the last man. The Indians had revolted against brutality. The small numbers of the Spanish soldiers were not sufficient to resist a sustained attack from the Indians. The first permanent European settlement in the New World was founded on Haiti and named Isabella in honor of the Spanish Queen. The Spanish colonists set about civilizing the island, which in the mean meant subjecting its natives. The Spaniards enslaved the Indians on Haiti with the approval of Columbus, then Governor-General of the area. The colonists did not believe that they could accomplish the task of clearing the island unless they had the help of slave labor. The Indians seemed conveniently defenseless and available for this purpose. Besides, had the Indians not killed the Spaniards in the fort of Navidad? With the job of colonization underway, Columbus made a few haphazard explorations and then set out once more for Spain. The expedition returned to Spain, arriving at Cadiz June 11th, 1496, after a hard and disastrous voyage. They brought back little gold and riches. The king and queen began to have doubts about the value of all these expensive expeditions which brought back so little from the East. And the Spaniards were less and less willing to go off on these dangerous voyages, which, so far, had made no one a fortune. With great difficulty, the third expedition was readied. Columbus turned to the prisons to recruit men. In January 1498, with 200 men and 2 ships, he sailed from Spain. In July 1498, the expedition was becalmed while en route. Columbus was disturbed because his motley crew was getting restless. What new misfortunes could strike, Columbus wondered, as he paced the still decks of his ship. At long last, the wind came up, and the expedition once again moved onward. Columbus' confidence in the eventual success of the voyage was renewed. He took a southwesterly course, hoping this time to arrive at the Spice Islands. Finally, the Voyages reached the South American mainland, and in August 1498, first viewed the American continent. Thus they discovered the Orinoco River. This river is found in Venezuela, but it was obvious to everyone that they had not reached Asia. Sadly, Columbus returned to the village of Isabella. In Haiti, conditions were bad. Some jealous Spaniards revolted against Columbus. He crushed the uprising, but a new governor sent from Spain went beyond his rights and arrested him. He was outraged at this injustice. How could the Spanish be so ungrateful? Columbus was sent back to Spain in October 1500. He insisted on wearing his chains until the king himself should direct otherwise. The ship rounded Spain with its voluntary prisoner, who set out at once to see the king and queen. In a touching ceremony at the Alhambra in Granada, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella held Columbus blameless and ordered him freed. They apologized for the unjust action of the governor they had sent and assured Columbus that he would be reprimanded. Moreover, Columbus would be allowed to make another exploratory voyage. The fourth and last expedition of Columbus sailed in May 1502 to explore the western Caribbean. In June, off the coast of Haiti, a hurricane almost wrote an end to this journey. But somehow Columbus' ship managed to survive the mountainous waves and fierce winds, and he continued his voyage. The voyagers explored the Central American coastline during 1502 and 1503. It was a difficult trip. They faced starvation and for a time were marooned on Jamaica. There was still no sign of the great wealth which Columbus expected to find. Columbus learned of the death of his benefactor in court, Queen Isabella, in 1504. He hurriedly returned to Spain. He was not certain that the king would continue to support him without the influence of his wife, who had always believed in the value of what Columbus was doing. At Segovia, Columbus met for the last time with King Ferdinand in May 1505. He requested finances for further exploration, but was refused. "No," said the king, "I will invest no more money in these costly expeditions which bring no money to the royal treasury." Columbus' career was ended. On May 20th, 1506, Columbus died at Valladolid, still believing that he had found a new route to Asia. Little did he know that it was a new world he had found. What Columbus believed to be a failure was actually one of the greatest successes in man's history. The 4 voyages of Christopher Columbus start the history of the Americas. His indomitable courage and perseverance first carried the civilization of the Old World to the New. The value of Columbus' contribution is inescapable. He is one of the few men who have the distinction of changing the whole course of human history.